Okay, so if it looks pretty creepy while my eyes are bouncing back and forth like that, it's because I have this beta eye contact effect in my NVIDIA browser going, which it mocks you having eye contact with the camera, whether you're actually looking at the camera or not. I wasn't looking at the camera, I was looking down at the screen, but it was trying to it is doing it now. It's forcing me to have eye contact, or at least it's visually portraying that, which is weird. It's an admittedly weird feature. I guess people struggle to make eye contact. I know I do. Eye contact, especially with a camera, isn't something that I'm used to doing. So I wanted to see what it would look like if I actually just had this little feature flipped on, and it's every bit as creepy as I thought it would be. You could tell when I'm not actually looking at it, because then my eyes start to go back and forth. Right now, I'm not really looking at it, but it looks like I'm doing something suspicious. I'm like the dog from The Simpsons that looks back and forth before it does something evil. At any rate, I'm gonna turn this off or maybe I should keep it on. I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna keep it hot just for this one though. At long last, I finally played Helldivers 2. I bought it some time ago, and after all the hype exploded over it, and hearing people recount their epic adventures and journeys and their combat experiences, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give this a shot. I downloaded it, but then I still didn't play it because a lot of other stuff I was involved with. I was trying to finish Cyberpunk 2077's Phantom Liberty expansion, which I did, and it was cool. I loved that. It was a great story it told. I was also playing Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, a little bit of a tribute to Akira Toriyama, and I'll talk a little bit about that, I guess, in a different video. I was watching Netflix Avatar. I was doing a lot of other stuff other than finally trying out Helldivers 2. But I did the other day. I jumped into it, and you know what? I have to say, I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did, because generally speaking, I don't like games like that. But I liked it a lot. For a couple of reasons. One, it's PvE with other players around you, like a cooperative PvE kind of game, which I like. I'm not a PvP person. I'm not that kind of dude. I'm overly competitive, and my skill levels are pretty low. It's a bad combination. It's a bad combination of things to be overly competitive with low skills. So usually PvP type games just put me in a bad mood. But this actually has a lot of really cool, fun ideas with respects to both how the combat and the gunplay and all of that functions, but also how they intermingle with the I guess the cooperative PvE aspects of it. Really a lot of fun. I like the fact that the leveling system doesn't really mean anything other than it's just like an indicator of how much experience a person has in the game. When I first started off, I just jumped into some quick matches and found myself a level 3 Helldiver in a squad of people that were like level 20 and shit. And just coming from my MMO background, I don't like MMOs. That's the thing. That's another big important component about this, is I was never a huge fan of MMOs. Despite the fact that I've worked on plenty of them. Some of the ones I've worked on are hanging on the wall behind me. City of Heroes, City of Villains, Ion. Yeah, Ion. Worked on City of Heroes, City of Villains, Ion. Lineage 2 a little bit. Tabula Rasa, which was the main game I worked on when I was there at NCSoft, but also a game that Helldivers 2 honestly kind of reminds me of a little bit, or at least the end game content from Tabula Rasa before the servers actually shut down. Up, I see you. Kitty went into the litter box. She's about to light it up. I may have to light a candle here in a second. But it actually reminds me a lot of that, because I guess it has a lot of the same vibes where aliens come down. I guess in Tabula Rasa, you had these moments of fortress defense where you could flip a fortress from being in control by the Bane or by the AFS, which was your military squadron. And in those moments where you would either come across a base that was controlled by Bane, the force fields would be red. You would have to engage in a pretty brutal fight to take the base from them. And then once you took the base from them, your drop ships will fly in all cinematic like, and you would control the base, and et cetera, et cetera. You could use merchants there or whatnot. And then periodically, the Bane would spawn to try to take the base back from you. And it would be a pretty pitched battle of, you know, the Bane forces fighting whoever happens to be at that outpost. And it was actually pretty cool. And towards the end of Tabula Rasa's lifestyle, they were doing a lot of other types of Bane invasions of planet Earth and whatnot that also played out really cool. And a lot of the vibes that I got from Helldivers was similar to vibes that I got from that end state. I know Tabula Rasa isn't a highly regarded game. It didn't last very long. What the hell? There's a dog outside barking, and I think that freaked her out. It wasn't a highly regarded game. The eye contact thing, I'm going to turn that off. Okay, enough of that. All right, that's what I'm actually looking at right there. It wasn't a highly regarded game. It was actually, I thought it was better than a lot of the criticisms about it. And I certainly thought it was better than the amount of engagement that players had with it, because I think at its peak it only had maybe 90,000 concurrent players. Not a whole lot of people got into it, but it was really fun. I mean, I can understand why a lot of people didn't get into it early on, but by the time they reached its in-game state, they had fixed a lot of the issues that people had with it, with respects to crafting and some combat stuff and blah, 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 UI customizations and all of that. And then just honestly, like, and this is the part that catches me with Helldivers 2, the community-driven world events, or I guess maybe the developer-driven world events. To me, that's really the cool shit. I like that a lot. I like it. When I first jumped into Helldivers 2, the first thing I did was run up to the main console and look at the map, because one thing I was kind of tangentially familiar with about the game was that it was kind of like all the players were working in concert with one another to see or to take territory from either bugs or automatons, and I wanted to see what that actually looked like. In my mind, I feel like this should be that should have been a component in a lot of other MMOs, and I think some have actually done. I just don't. Again, I don't play a lot of MMOs because a lot of the times the gameplay was boring for me. And I like a part of why I liked Tabula Rasa to the extent that I did was because the gameplay was more action oriented, and I like Helldivers 2 because, you know, it's more action oriented. I like the environment, the vibe. I like the wartime feel, and I like the fact that it does have those developer driven events. I mean, I think that's really cool. I liked the fact that I could go and see, oh, this planet is about 60% quote unquote liberated, right? There's a whole underlying discussion about the satirical nature of Helldivers 2 and whether it's actually pro-fascist or anti-fascist, depending on how dumb you are. And I'm not going to get into the nature of all of that. Suffice it to say that media literacy is at an all-time low right now, so it makes, you know, it's no surprise to me that people have a hard time understanding satire. But regardless, the actual play mechanics of the game are a lot of fun. The weapons felt great and all of that, and there's no real reason for me to suspect that wouldn't have been buttoned down. At this point, it's pretty hard to develop a shooter game and not have your control scheme be, you know, usable, I mean, just even usable on a baseline level, let alone actually fun feeling. And it does feel fun. It feels fluid. It all makes sense. But the added component that they have in this that I thought was really, really neat, and it plays really well. It's kind of frustrating at first, but as you get used to it, especially in the heat of combat, it actually does feel really cool. It feels like you're doing something. Are the stratagems. The stratagems are really cool because you have to hold down the button, the RB or LB button, and then you have to enter like a Konami code of sorts, like this up, down, left, right sort of thing in order to actually trigger the stratagem that you want to use to spawn in your hand. Then you throw it on the ground, and, you know, whether it's an orbital strike, which calls in like a bombardment of bombs and lasers to the targeted location, or you're just calling in for a refill of your ammo or a machine gun or whatever else it might be. It feels really cool. It feels there's something about having explosions going on around you, bugs or robots swarming you, your squad mates are going nuts, you're going nuts, you're running for your life, and you know you could get a better handle on what's going on around you if you could just call in an airstrike, or if you could just get, you know, that machine gun that you ran out of ammo for, or maybe you just died and was respawned, and that's another component I'll talk about in a second. If you could just get that and you hit the button and like you're punching the code in frantically, like the idea that you have to punch the code in, it feels like, you know, I grabbed my walkie-talkie or whatever on the battlefield, and I'm like, beep 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 beep, come on, I need to get this, beep beep beep. I'm fat fingering it. Like it's a cool component, and it does add a lot more tension to it. To the whole experience than you would otherwise have if you just pressed the button and then had to like cycle through options and whatnot. I talked about in my review of Skull and Bones about how clunky the controls felt with respects to healing yourself, bringing up the radial menu and healing yourself in the middle of ship combat, how it felt cluttered and clunky, and I was stumbling across those controls and the confusion between the radial menu being a toggle and other types of interactions being a hold, press and hold.
What is even in this direction?
But you don't get that in this game at all. They've got it cinched down perfectly. And even though there is a more complicated mechanism with calling your stratagems by punching in the code, it actually it feels good. It is a good feel. Like it's not as much of a boondoggle as I would have assumed it was when I first saw that's what I needed to do in order to, you know, get a supply, a resupply, or to get my machine gun, or to get the mech, or to call it ordnance, or, and this is like a critically important part, to resurrect a fallen teammate. You're playing in a squad and you or one of your teammates go down. You don't auto respawn, you're just dead. But you can be respawned if one of your squad mates calls the stratagem to revive you and punches in that code. It can get pretty hairy at times if you end up getting ambushed and one of your guys dies. And not only do you have to run for your life or shoot somebody in a hurry that's like right up on you and running isn't an option, but if you feel like, oh, I'm not going to survive this encounter, it becomes critically important to revive your teammate, because if you die, who's reviving you? So you're running for your life, you're shooting these dudes, you're pressing LB and trying to punch in the code to revive your friend. At first, when I first started playing it, I was stumbling left and right all over. Well, when I first started playing it, I didn't even know that's how you were supposed to revive them. But once I figured that out, I was stumbling all over it. But you do get better the more that you do it. So, and once you do get good at it, you know, you start feeling a little bit like a dynamo. You know, like you're doing all this multitasking shit. You're shooting, you're dodging, you're ducking, you're diving to the floor, you're calling in resupplies, you're calling it an ordnance and throwing the thing over there. You have to have some foresight, because the enemies are marching towards you from the distance. You know they're going to be on you at any given moment, but you call in your airstrike. You don't want to throw your thing right where the enemies are, because it takes a while for the ordnance to get there. So by the time they get there, they'll bomb an empty part of the field and the enemy's beyond you. So you have to plant it, like throw it a little bit right before them. So by the time the ordnance comes in, they're bombing exactly where it's like being a quarterback throwing with anticipation. So you throw that thing over there, the airstrike is bombing them. You throw another one to get a resupply, or you revive you revive one of your teammates. It's a lot of hectic action. There's a lot that you're doing with the controls, but it all feels really good and fluid. It all works really well together, and it's all a lot of fun. So I really enjoy what they did with the control scheme in the game. I love what they did with using stratagems, and again, just the general atmosphere and vibe reminded me a lot of the in-game tabula rasa stuff, which I thought was critically unexplored, underdeveloped, just by virtue of what was going on with that dev team at the time. But also, obviously, this is many years later, and it's a different type of game, so it's a little bit it doesn't, when I compare it to, when I say it's like that, I don't mean that it feels, this doesn't feel dated. Helldivers 2 doesn't feel dated. Quite the opposite. It feels much more advanced than a lot of other shooter games that I've played in recent years, which is why I don't really play a lot of shooter games, because a lot of them are so cookie cutter, copy and paste, variations of one another. This one feels different in a good way. It feels like it's a more evolved type of game because it focuses so much more. The focus is a lot less on, or at least in the earlier parts, maybe as I unlock other weapons and whatnot, my opinion on those will change. But to me, it feels like it's less focused around systems and bombarding players with overly complicated skill trees and a bombardment of different types of weapons that have different types of effects that are only effective if you go down this particular branch of character progression and all of that other obnoxious shit. It doesn't have anything to do with that. It's basically you all get these guns, and yeah, there are some guns that are better than others, but you all get these guns, and may the best man win, or the best squad win rather, and not even PvP, but just against horde of robots that they could present a challenge because they swarm you. Like it's you're going up against a swarm. It is very much so. A lot of people right out the gate compare this game to Starship Troopers, and obvious aesthetics aside, the bug swarm the bug swarm mechanic does resemble a lot of Starship Troopers. Like you get swarmed not just by bugs but the robots too. Doesn't matter really how good you are if you don't know how to properly navigate an ambush by a horde of creatures, which again is where you get used to being able to become a boxcar racer with respects to pulling up your stratagem and punching in the code and shooting and double tapping to dive onto the ground and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot going on. It's easy. It's easier than you would think it would be to grasp onto the concepts and the controls, but it is still very much so a challenge. I actually ended up soloing one mission. After I ran a few with the level 20 dudes, I went and soloed one bug mission, and it took a while. I managed to complete it before the timer expired, but it was real touch and go for a second, and there was a lot. It was like a survey mission where I had to go to different parts of the map and put down some kind of a drill, and you have to interact with it quite a bit. You come up on it and there's a screen with arrows in it, and just like using your stratagem, you have to punch the arrows in the sequence that's on the screen. Then there's a part of the map where you kind of have to feel around for the hot zone, and once you feel around for the hot zone, it starts to survey the soil. But then like during the whole process of doing this, it's disrupting a hive of insects nearby, and then they start to swarm you. You have to fight them off and all of that. It's pretty interesting, and you can solo it, or at least for those ones. Maybe there are some missions later you just simply can't, but for some of them you can solo them, and it is a challenge, but it is fun too. Ultimately, just as someone who, again, I think right now I'm level 4 or 5, just barely getting into this game, it's easy to get into. It's super easy to pick up and jump into and have fun. One of the reasons why I don't like playing PvP games is because I feel a tremendous amount of anxiety whenever I, as a newcomer, jump into a game just trying to figure out the controls and just trying to get good from the start, but I'm already playing with people that are beyond that level. And it's like, oh, I'm just a drag now. I'm weighing everyone down. Like that can't be fun. That can't be fun for someone else to have to fucking tailor their gaming experience to someone else's training wheels. And sometimes, most of the times when you're in a PvP game like that, people can be understanding, and that's fine. But it's still not a feel. It's obviously, sometimes people can't be understanding and they're blatant assholes about it. But either way, whichever direction that goes, it's still not a situation that I like to be in. I'd rather, get my bearings around a game first and then jump into a multiplayer experience. That was the issue I had with Sea of Thieves too. I was feeling my way around how to function in that game when another player just showed up and blasted my ship out the water. Now that player actually ended up giving me some advice and tips, and he was very, friendly and helpful. He wasn't like a complete asshole about it. He was just playing the game as it was designed. But then that's why I don't like the games that are designed that way. To me, that's a shitty design. And they've since come back from that and added in the safer seas mechanic and whatnot to allow people to explore the gameplay of Sea of Thieves without the threat of being destroyed by another player, which is cool. I think that's a good addition. I had that fear and that anxiety with Helldivers 2 starting off, but it was quickly diminished when I realized that the leveling component is largely cosmetic. There's no real difference between a level 22 person and a level 3. They have better looking armor, and I'm sure they have access to weapons that I don't have access to, or maybe ordinances that they've unlocked that I don't have access to. But other than that, there really isn't that much of a difference. And people that I played with, I haven't communicated with any of them because I think when you do the quick match option, everyone knows that they're just playing with randos and they don't want to engage in any kind of conversation. But no one was a dick to me or anything like that. When I died, people revived me and I revived them, and we generally followed each other and saved each other from ambushes and all of that. So it was a cool experience. Like, it didn't feel... I think games that are overtly PvE probably attract a more amiable gaming audience than games that are PvP. And there's a whole other philosophy about what the prevalence of PvP gaming has done to the psyche of a whole generation of gamers. And I wish I think there's a video over it. Maybe I'll find it and do a react to it if I can remember what it was called. But I definitely subscribe to the theory that the prevalence of PvP gaming, especially with the rise of Twitch and other streaming services and professional gaming and all of that sort of stuff, has created more animosity and toxicity amongst the gaming contingent than it has created anything positive. So, there's a reason I don't play PvP games, and it's always been that way. It was that way back in like the arcade era. Every now and then I'd go to the arcade and I'd play Street Fighter or Soul Calibur against the computer. But if there were other people, playing Street Fighter or Soul Calibur, even if I knew I could beat them, and I've beaten plenty of people at the arcades before, even if I knew I could beat them, I wouldn't play them because I just didn't want to. I didn't want to get into that vibe. I've seen so many fights. When I was a kid, I saw so many fights break out at arcades, because of all sorts of shitty things. From someone getting their ass whooped and being hurt about it and then starting a fight over that, or someone just shit talking and they don't know how to shit talk properly. Like, there's a way to do it that doesn't, call a ass whipping onto yourself. But some people don't know how to do that, and they end up saying something, they cross that line, and, they get an ass whipping. Seen a lot of that. And, I've seen a lot of, hey, I had my quarter up there. That meant my turn was next. I was like, I didn't see a quarter. It's like, did you just steal my quarter? Like, I didn't see a quarter. You didn't have a quarter up there. And then the fight breaks out that way. I've never been... Like, any kind of environment of competitive gaming has, in my experience, always been a honeypot for the worst assholes. So I do agree with the general thesis that PvP gaming has bred a culture of toxicity amongst gaming. Which is why I like PvE style games, because it kind of weeds that contingent out by mechanical necessity. So with that said, I still have a lot of Helldivers 2 to play. I'm definitely going to keep playing the game. It's a lot of fun. I think it's very, very worth it. I know a lot of people have been raging about it lately because there was a patch that nerfed a lot of weapons, but you know what? Bring it on. I'm okay with that. The more chaotic and difficult, I think nerfed weapons, and maybe this is a part of also the anger and the toxicity that comes from a climate of PvP. Nerfed weapons really only I feel like nerfed weapons really are only the most impactful towards PvP players than it is PvE, especially cooperative PvE. Because for a game like Helldivers 2, I feel like nerfed weapons would make it more fun. Because then you have to rely more on your squad mates. You can't just brute force your way through some of the more hellish moments of a swarm or an ambush or something. And it's not like you have permadeath or anything. If you die, you can be revived. I feel like it just makes it makes the chaos of the moment more challenging and in a fun way. Whereas with PvP, if you're you know obsessively keeping track of where you're at on a leaderboard and you're trying to become a pro gamer, or you are a pro gamer about it, and or whatever the situation may be, you're shit talking a bunch of other players and no scoping them, and then all of a sudden your weapon is weaker than it used to be. That has a demonstrable impact on your identity as a player, the product that you put out as a streamer, or your ability to function as a pro gamer and make money doing it. It has more of an impact in that vibe. I think, personally, my opinion, I could be wrong, but I feel like it has more of an impact in that way than it would in a game like Helldivers 2. So, and I know a lot of people were angry about the nerfing, but I don't mind it. Sure, nerf away. Nerf away and have fun. I'm going to keep playing, so that's my 2 cents on that.